Hello and welcome to the Mindful Men podcast, a show inspiring men to be mindful about their lives. Each week, we'll dive into a range of topics that matter to men and hear from everyday people doing extraordinary things. So if you love the show, please give it a 5-star rating and share it with your mates. Now, before we get into this week's episode, please note that some of the content may trigger you. And if this happens, please reach out to your support networks. It's really important. If you can't get enough of Mindful Men, head over to our website. It's www.mindful-men.com.au. Find the show notes and the links to our socials there. But for now, sit back, relax, and let's get mindful. G'day guys, and welcome to another episode of the Mindful Men podcast. I'm your host, Simon Rennie, and today we're getting mindful about men's mental health, suicide, and vulnerability. And joining me for today's discussion, I've got Dayne Weston from the Gold Coast, Queensland. How you going, Dayne?
Good, Simon. Thanks for having me, mate.
Thanks for coming on. I'm really excited for this discussion. Now, to give you an introduction, you're the founder of Men of Gold, which empowers vulnerability in men. We're going to explore vulnerability today, but you're also a former professional athlete playing in the National Rugby League and the English Super League as well. You're married, you're a father of 3. I love talking to dad, so we'll talk a bit about dadding as well. And you've got a huge passion for improving mental health in the community. So it's quite a CV you've got there.
Yeah, mate, there's a bit there. But like you say, I've been on a bit of a journey throughout my career as a rugby league player. But now, outside that, working in mental health and trying to improve men, especially, is something I'm passionate about and just grateful for the opportunity that I get each day.
Awesome. Let's start off with fatherhood, because I'm a dad too. I've got 2 little ones, and you've got 3 boys. What's their ages?
13, 10, and 9.
Oh, wow. You're a bit further ahead than I am. Tell me that it gets better.
I can't promise you anything. No, it does. I think there's certain things get easier, but obviously with my eldest, 13, it's at a bit of a tough time at the moment where there's a lot of changes, and that's been very challenging, I must say. But love the boys and love the opportunity we see to grow. It just goes so fast. I was only talking to someone yesterday, and I think that my eldest 13 doesn't seem that long ago he was born. So I think it's a reminder for me, especially, mate, just to enjoy them and not wish them away too quick.
Absolutely. And thinking about your journey as a father, what does it mean to you to be a dad? And can you remember kind of like day one of fatherhood, and can you compare that to what you're going through now?
Yeah, it's quite funny, mate. When I was a young kid, I've always been a rugby league fanatic. I was a Broncos fan growing up, and from a young age, I was about 6. And I always said that I wanted to play NRL, win a comp, and do a lap of honour with my 2 boys. Now, for a 6-year-old to have that goal, it's pretty detailed, but like, who's thinking of kids when you're 6? But it was something I always wanted to do, mate, and to be a dad. And to be able to live out that dream later in my life was pretty special. And throughout my journey, mate, I've probably dropped the ball as a father throughout that stage too, if I'm being really honest, mate. Like, I went through a real tough time with the divorce and stuff like that. And I really got to a point like they were a bit of a hindrance to me, which is, yeah, it's tough to admit, but it was. That's just being real, mate. Because of my own issues that was going on, I wasn't sorting them out. And then I was taking that out on my family. And I get the opportunity now to be able to put my time into them and not all those little moments. I was saying to someone yesterday, my eldest he's just such a lovable young kid, and he loves affection. He just wants to be around you, near you, loved. And I'll go to the shops for 5 minutes. I just want to break because I need to duck out. He'd be like, "Dad, can I come?" And I used to say no because I wanted a break. But I know that's his love language, and he actually just wants to be around me. So I suck it up. I say, "Get in, son," and we go. And I just see that as he grows too, he's becoming a young man, and I need to cherish those moments.
Yeah. And are they growing up playing rugby as well? Are they following in your footsteps?
They're not, mate. They were. Jet, my eldest, started in Melbourne when I was there and loved it. And then we went to the UK, and he kind of fell out of love a little bit because how cold it was. And they had about 13 on the bench. And then Blaze, he played up until last year, and yeah, just not for him, which is fine, mate. I've never pushed them into rugby league. I always just wanted to play a sport. I think it's important for young kids, especially this day and age with technology and everything going on, that they have some type of activity-based routine in their life. It doesn't have to be a competitive sport, but even if they're being active, I think it's important. And so I always encourage that, mate. I always encourage that if it's not rugby league or it's soccer or what, you're just doing something. So, yeah, so they're both retired now, mate. So they joined me in retirement.
Oh, it's not a bad place to be retired early, so you don't get all the injuries as well.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk a bit about life before parenting and growing up. And you mentioned before that you're a Broncos fan. So can you tell us a bit about your childhood? Are you from the Gold Coast or did you grow up in Brisbane or somewhere else? And then how did you get into rugby? And then tell us about your early rugby days.
Mate, I grew up in Goulburn, New South Wales, down near Canberra. I grew up there till 15. I moved away from home. So from a young age, mate, I always wanted to play rugby league. I grew up playing with Todd Carney, and his dad was our coach growing up. And we had a pretty competitive team. I think we went undefeated for about 6 years. It was stupid. But Todd's dad was a coach, but he was really hard on us. And at times people would argue that he was too hard, but he taught us so much, mate. And I think, as you see now with coaches, that a lot of the time they're not technical, the greatest coaches. They're just good man managers. And I believe that's something that he was great with us young kids and gave us those challenges and through adversity taught us how to strive in those positions. So I'm really grateful for Todd's old man. He's not with us anymore, but yeah, I grew up doing that and made it about 13, 14. My parents went through a divorce and it was a really challenging time for me personally. And I was at a situation where I wanted to give footy up just because I was emotionally all over the place. And I had a mentor kind of come in, one of Dad's friends, to stick by me. And he said, mate, I don't want you to throw this away. I want to help you. And to this day, he's one of my best mates and I owe him so much. And such a loving man, mate, that just poured his heart into me and showed me the way. And that was really important for my growth as well. And I wasn't growing. And I got to a stage where I was kind of getting pushed. When you're younger, if you're not that good, you play on the wing. Mm-hmm. So I made me way and I'm playing on the wing. And I was like, I'm not enjoying this. And so that at the same time, I was kind of, what's the point? And we played a trial against Canaries in some New South Wales championship thing. And Dad had a contact there. And so long story short, got in contact, went down there and started playing for Dapto and would travel from Goulburn to Wollongong couple a week and end up playing 5'8". So went from a forward that never grew into playing in the halves. And then I ended up moving to Wollongong and I lived with a few different people, then moved into the Dragons house and I was still at school, lived with 18, 19-year-olds and a Filipino nanny that used to come and cook and clean and then leave. So it was a pretty cool experience, but obviously had a growth spurt. And my first representative, Harold Matthews, I played hooker for the Steelers. And the following year I played front row. So within 12 months, I had to give up my time in the halves and it was time to play in the forward. So it's something, mate, from that, I got the opportunity to go to Cronulla when I left school as a 17-year-old. And yeah, that's where my journey started in the NRL.
Yeah, what was it like walking through the doors of Cronulla the first time? Did you pinch yourself and go, oh, I can't believe I'm doing this?
Pretty surreal, mate. When you're young, I suppose you kind of take things for granted a little bit. I mean, I was like footy head, like all the time. I'd get in the big league as soon as I come out that morning. And when I went there, it was a bit, because I was never talented, mate. I always say that. The only way I got what I got out of my career was just through hard work. And even at times, I probably could have worked harder. But just to be around that vicinity was pretty cool, mate. I can still pinch myself to this day that I got that opportunity. But it was cool, mate. I mean, Cronulla's a beautiful place. I moved into the Shark House there with a few other guys. Dane Nielsen was in there, Jeremy Lattimore, and there was about 6 of us at one point. We later on got kicked out. The late Steve Rogers was the CEO. He come and kicked us because we're up to no good. And from that following year, I moved out and got my own place. And a couple of years later, I made my debut.
Awesome. And then you've moved around a bit with your footy. And tell us a bit about that, because some players or the traditionalists like to have a one club, one career type thing, but you've moved around a bit. What was it like to move around and find new homes and play with different teams and so forth? How did that impact you in terms of your career?
I enjoyed it, moving around. I can't sit still, mate. So I kind of look back at it now. The way it panned out, I was grateful that I did have the opportunity to move around. But in saying that, I look at someone like, imagine I'm living on the Gold Coast now, and if I was a young kid that got the opportunity to play at the Titans and played my whole career there, that'd be pretty special to be able to leave home, go to training, come home and just grow up around this. I think it's really cool to grow up in a community and have your close friends and that around. It was really hard, mate. It was easy for me, but a lot harder on my ex-wife, who we had to just pick up and go. And reflecting, mate, I probably never really had those discussions where she was comfortable in moving. It was always, I've got this contract. It's almost like we just have to go because the money's too good or the opportunity's too good. And so I didn't mind it, mate. It gave me a lot of lessons in different environments too. I think that's something that's great for me to be able to be very discerning to see what went well at clubs and what didn't. And because I've learned so much off the field, that's helped me today. So yeah, I enjoyed it, mate. It's good to experience a few different places, and especially over in the UK.
I'm interested to hear about how your mental health journey started as well. And was it through your career, and how did you manage that playing rugby? And then I guess what were some of the challenges that were coming up for you, and how did you cope through those?
Yeah, mate. The whole passion for mental health obviously, sparked through my own journey. And like you said, I've been pretty open about that. I think it's imperative that we are open, people who are comfortable with it, because the only way we're ever going to get better and improve this space is by speaking, by sharing our lived experiences, because it gives people an understanding, mate. They're not alone. And when you're in a dark place and you feel lonely, you do feel alone. And it's important that other men and women hear that people are going through this stuff, and to reach out and knowing that people want to put their arm around you and help you. And for me, mate, it's been a real journey where I've learned a lot, even in the last few years, about myself as I continually unpack childhood trauma and with my own battle with depression and anxiety. It started as I've done my work, mate. It all started at a young age. A lot of it had to do with performance-based love, which was based on me playing rugby league. And if I went well, that I felt loved. If I didn't, I'd feel alone. And that was real. That was real, mate. And that was something that I probably didn't understand as a kid. But then when I look back, but when mum and dad split up, that was a pivotal moment where I've kind of went down a different path, but just mentally and emotionally, I was probably empty. I never had vulnerability modeled to me in the home. Everything was swept under the carpet. I'd hear mum and dad fight, but when they fought, I was asleep, or they thought I was asleep, and I'd come out and I'd hear them fight and that. And I suppose from that trauma as a young kid, and then knowing that I never got help and no one ever knew anything as well. And I just thought that that's what you did. The old thing, and it's still around, where you just get on with it. You're a man, toughen up. And because I left home, mate, at a young age, I had to grow up quick. So 15, and I don't have parents anymore, and I'm living out with teenagers in a house. It's kind of like the parts of that were good, but there's a lot where I reflect on with my psychologist that I lost a lot of my childhood, and I went searching for those missed memories when I retired. And it's a pretty common thing to happen for a lot of men, especially. And I went through my, I suppose, early days at Penrith, and I was getting real down when I'd leave training, and this pattern would keep happening. I was miserable around home. I was irritable a lot of the time. But at training, I was good. But then it was almost like a drug, mate. I'd take it when I got to training, I was good. And then it'd wear off when I went home. And things with my ex-wife were kind of, battling. And she's like, you need to go get some help. And she didn't know that I got the help. Well, I shouldn't say got the help, because I didn't. I just went and seen someone. And I went and seen a couple, because the first person I seen said, you've got depression and anxiety. After doing some time there, went and got another opinion, and they all said the same. And so I ignored it. I say a thing. I didn't tell anyone. And the reason why, because, mate, I felt embarrassed that I was married, had two beautiful kids. I just recently bought a house. I was playing NRL. I was like, my education around it, mate. I'm not depressed. I've got all these things. And obviously through more education, and understanding, I know that mental health does not discriminate. It doesn't just point out that, oh, you look good on paper and you've got this and that. You won't be affected. But that's what I thought, mate. So I just didn't say anything. And, mate, I went through the next 6 years wearing a mask, just putting on a brave act around other people. But unfortunately, my family were the ones that suffered, because I put on a face when I was in public, but then when I was home, mate, I mean, I wasn't miserable all the time. But so it was through that, mate. And then when I was in the UK, things were deteriorating with my wife and I I just had a reality check. The first year I was there, mate, we got promoted into the Super League. That was one of the coolest experiences, but I was so unhappy. I won all the awards at the presentation that year, literally all of them, and was still miserable. Nothing could make me happy, mate. And it got really bad, mate, that suicide was something really on the forefront of my mind every morning. And as confronting as that may seem to a lot of people, it's so real. And it would soon disappear as I got up and got going. But it was something so real that was my worth. I was like, there's a lot of things I did, throughout my time that I'm not proud of. And I suppose I was beating myself up in my own, head. And I call it like self-incarceration, because that's what we do. When we can't express our emotions and actually open up to someone, we just continually tell ourselves lies and beat ourselves up. And then we can't escape. But we have the key to unlock that, but we just choose not to. And I suppose that was what it was for me. And yeah, went through the divorce and had to retire, pack up everything in the UK. It was a pretty rushed experience to come back to the Gold Coast to try and fix things with my wife and my family, and it wasn't to be. And yeah, so that's kind of the start of it, mate. And then it just started to down spiral with partying, drugs, alcohol. Yeah.
Yeah, wow. You describe what so many guys go through. It's that the shame almost of feeling the way that they feel. Also the lack of words for understanding or to be able to speak about what's going on as well. Influences of childhood trauma. I was really interested around the performance-based psychological impact as well. So many young guys who play sport go through similar. And if they're playing really well, they're training well, that's when they get the accolades. But if they're messing up, or they miss a training, or they miss a game, or whatever, that starts to impact as well, both in the home and also through coaches as well. I'm interested in how rugby league internally in clubs, did anybody talk about health and well-being from a psychological perspective, or was it all physically based?
They did, mate, but I think a lot of the education and awareness stuff is probably later in my career. I think in my time at Melbourne, my later years at Penrith, potentially. I can't really remember, mate. It's a bit of a blur, but definitely at Melbourne there was. They've got a great wellbeing team, and Robbo and BP, the guys there, they're just like friends. I spent so much time in there, not because I felt like I needed to. They're just great people that were never pressing to ask me how I was going or this. They're just good people. And sure enough, I kind of learned my fate that I'd work in that space one day, and there's probably reasons why I was in there. But they're fantastic, mate. I think the good clubs, and they all do now, again, working with the QRL, I understand the education that goes around and what each NRL wellbeing person has to do. And there's minimum standards that they have to do. So every club has opportunity and education around that every year. They have to do it, which is important. I still believe there should be more, but there's certainly good support. Now, each NRL club has 2 wellbeing people there, and usually a chaplain as well. And some clubs have more than that. So I think the Storm at one stage had 4 or 5, including a chaplain, which had more than enough support around. And sometimes, mate, just the good cultures at good clubs, you don't have to be a wellbeing person to be empathetic and want to put your arm around someone and be there for someone. And that's Melbourne throughout, mate. They're just good people that want the best for you.
Yeah. I'm always interested in watching sport because I'm a sports fanatic. I love my sport. And whenever I see a player get injured physically, it's all over the news. They follow it day in, day out until that player is recovered. But then if there's maybe a mental health situation, it's very hush-hush. It's very, they're just taking time away from the sport. And we've seen it in so many stars across different sports as well. I'm interested in what your thoughts are around that, because my view is, as a mental health advocate and a therapist myself, is the more we can talk about it, the more we can normalize it and take away some of the shame and stigma. On the other side is also, I guess, managing things like privacy and confidentiality around quite sensitive topics. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on, should we be advocating more for, they're taking a mental health break as opposed to just an injury break, or just call it an injury and then off they go? What's your thoughts on that?
Mate, this is a big one for how long you got. But mate, I'm huge for this. I think this is what will step into my vulnerability piece as well. I think of a player going to training, and I think of myself when I was miserable and I was feeling down, but never felt I could just walk in with the culture of a rugby league team at not all clubs, but generalising it, walking in and going, because usually we take the piss out of each other. we do that easily. And that's just footy. You know, you just do it and it's easy. But a lot of the time we do that because we're deflecting off something that we're dealing with or whatnot. But always think if you're feeling miserable and you come in and you've had a shit of a day at training, drop balls, usually it's performance. It's like, Westo, what are you doing here? You're off. You weighed in. You weren't lifting as heavy. And then all this is based on performance and you're getting ripped into here. But they don't know how you're feeling. But it comes back to setting in the environment where you feel hey to actually share that. And mate, I'm huge for it. Why can't someone walk in to the club and just say for Melbourne, for instance, and I walked up to Craig Bellamy and I said, Craig, I'm just feeling shit today. Mentally, I'm all over the place. I don't know why. I feel empty. I just don't want to be here. Good clubs, mate. If people went to them, and I know for a fact, if I said that to Craig, he would have said, go and check in with Robbo and mate, get yourself home. Like 120% he would have. And I don't think players feel like they could do that, but the good coaches and the good clubs would acknowledge that to understand, okay, you need help and you might need a day to get yourself better. Because you're right, mate, all these surface injuries, we can see them, but if I hurt my ankle, I'll go to the physio and I'll spend an hour appointment or half an hour booked in with him in the day. But then if I'm mentally no good, we've only got 2 well-being people. If other people are in there, it's not even that, mate. We just need to be able to get to a point where we can speak openly about it and not even have to say, oh, for instance, Dayne Weston, he's out this week because he's injured. No, he's out because he's battling mental health at the moment. You know what I mean? Because I'm like, why can't we? Because that's why we are where we are, mate, because everyone keeps trying to like polish something to make it look a bit better or hide it, put it away. And I'm like, it's the news, mate. What, 7 men today, again, will take their own life, almost 50 a week. We're talking 2,500 plus a year, but we don't hear about it, mate. We don't hear it on the news. No one prints it, talks about it in the media, on the news. It's just like, why not? Everyone's still on eggshells around it, mate, where it's like, oh, it's a bit confronting, and it just grinds me, mate, because, and even days like, Are You Okay Day, I've been open about this. Great initiative. Needs to happen. I'm not saying to scrap it. What about the rest of the days of the year? Why are we putting on days and events for a short period of time to highlight mental health and then shutting up about it? It just honestly winds me up because I'm like, it's like next month, it's like there's a push-up challenge out there. Great. But then after that month, what are we doing? Are we just closing the doors on everything? And people got it so wrong, mate. Or unless we can sell something, unless we can make money off it, or people don't do it. And it's just, sorry, mate, just getting a bit fired up here.
No, I think you've said exactly all the things that I feel and talk about regularly in my circles and on the podcast before as well. And I think the more we can be open about it, and this is why I do the podcast and have stories from people all across the world, is to share these stories and to normalize these discussions. Like suicide, for example, is a word that so many people balk at and they go, oh, I don't want to talk about that. But it's just a word in the dictionary. It's just a word that describes something that happens in our society. And the more we can talk about it, the more we can normalize it. And then also many more guys might go, oh, Dane's talking about it, Simon's talking about it on the podcast. Maybe I can talk about it as well.
Yeah.
And so I guess it leads into the point of what point you saw a few people earlier on in your mental health journey. Did you go back to therapy, or what did you find that helped you kind of work through it and cope better?
Yeah, I went back, mate. Well, when I say went back, I never got therapy to begin with. That was obviously not a great decision. And I suppose after the divorce and after I went through a really tough time, my only option I had was to get help. And I seen a few therapists and I didn't actually connect with them. One was a sports psych that was trying to get me back as my ex-wife. And mate, you're not listening to me. It's not what I'm here for. Mate, I reckon I went through about 4 before I found one that I'm connecting a little bit with him and can kind of understand. And my wife come with me to my last one that I left. And because I thought it was important for her to be there to see what I'm battling through so we can at home be more clear and open. And I think that was important. And we walked out the door and she just first words were, he's not for you. And I knew it, she knew it. And then I now have a psychologist here on the coast and connect really well with him. And yeah, there was a lot of my own work as well, other than the psychologist, mate. I was a victim for so long. I look back on my life and even through selection in a rugby league team, my circumstance, everything was someone else's fault. Well, there was a reason why. it wasn't my fault. It was because of all these other things. And when I owned up to that, mate, and when I was just like, this is on you, stop pointing at everyone else. And that's when I started making some progress, mate, because I was so stuck in that victim mentality. I see so many, mate. I've got people that I see day to day that are still there. They don't understand that they are victims. They don't look at it like that, but you're going to stay so stuck if you just keep that mentality. And for me, that was my only way forward. And it was the best thing I did, mate. And before I met my now wife, that was through kind of that period. And then I met my wife now, and she's a Christian. And at first, I always have had a faith as far as believing God and stuff, but never, was a Christian, never went to church and stuff like that. But she was going to church on Sunday, and I said, "Oh, come." She goes, "You don't have to." And at first I was just trying to impress her, mate, if I'm being honest. And I went, and then after a few months of going, mate, it was just so different to what I expected of a church. I just expected these cathedrals and this, but our church in Tweed is just like a theaterette, and you walk down, the music's playing, and mate, I just felt so good. And I met Locke, the pastor at the church, and no one ever put any pressure on me about becoming Christian and giving my life to Christ. It was something that I found myself, and it was such a pivotal moment for me, mate, in my recovery, but also knowing who I am and how loved I am and loved by God. And it's been the foundation for my recovery, mate, and my life forward.
Yeah. I'm interested because you've grown up in footy teams, and there's certain culture and community involved in footy teams. Describe like finding community through the church. I'd be interested to hear about that because community is really important for maintaining our well-being. How have you found community in the church?
It's really good, mate. It's such a positive action to be able to the church connect. I think connection is a huge part of mental health, and especially in men. And that's what we try to create at Men of Gold, is not just have our men's nights, but also have events where men can actually come and connect without a beer in their hand and actually understand. Because, mate, as people get older, they're more likely to be lonely. They're more likely to isolate themselves because they don't feel like they're at an age where they can go and meet new people or what. And so that repetitive behavior of making that decision, they'll either go to the pub and get drunk, and then after 6 beers, they'll meet someone that's probably in the same position. And then it's just the same old cycle. And I think the connection part of the community is huge, mate. And the church provides that. And yeah, it's what we do when we're there with the worship, with the message from our pastor or speakers that come in is really powerful. But as a Christian, mate, that's just on a Sunday. There's a lot of our life that we need to do on our own and not be just rock up and be a Sunday Christian, so to speak, where people put all their stuff, hide it away, what's troubling them in the week, and then rock up and walk into church. And comes back to what you said before about, just rocking up and saying you're okay and not being able to articulate your feelings. Like, you should be able to walk into church, and when someone's greeting you at the door, go, "Hey, g'day, Dayne, how you going, mate?" I should be able to be in a space where I could go, "Oh, me and the wife would just have the biggest fight on the way here." And that's real, mate. There's times that happens, but unfortunately, sometimes in the church, it's like everyone's got to be like smiley and be upfront and normal at times. And I challenge that a lot of the time to be like, I love our church and I love what churches are about, but I just think sometimes people aren't their true, I suppose, expressing their true vulnerability in circumstances and just hoping that putting a smile on in the mask because they're at church will help them. But I think, again, it'd be great if we're in a point at church where people could go, "How you going?" Instead of saying good because it's easy, actually saying, "No, I'm not good, actually." Because we'll never get better if we don't talk about anything, whether it's mental health or any challenges in our life.
Absolutely. And so let's talk about vulnerability, because I link vulnerability with authenticity. And it's kind of like what you're saying about just showing your true self. And it's the same with Are You OK Day as well. Like, the more we can do this every day or every week, the more we normalize it. So vulnerability is a bit of a taboo topic for guys. A lot of guys hear that word and they run the other way. Tell us in your words, what is vulnerability and why should men get vulnerable?
Vulnerability, mate. Well, the whole idea of empowering vulnerability and why I use that, and that's our motto here at Men of Gold. It's the only way through anything, and especially mental health, is through vulnerability. We're not going to ever overcome anything unless we become comfortable being vulnerable. Because if we can't be vulnerable, you'll end up like me and in a position where you're not getting help and things aren't working for you and you keep losing all these things because you just can't help it. vulnerability, and a lot of it, you mentioned it before, mate, about shame. It all stems from that. A lot of the time, people struggle with vulnerability because it's very courageous, mate, to be vulnerable, because a lot of men, and like you said before about them running the other way, when they think about being vulnerable, they think of something deep, dark that they want to share. But there's a big risk you take when you do that, mate, because someone else can use that against you. So there's a big fear, and there's a massive reason why people don't share is because they feel like someone's going to use it against them. So they just keep it to themselves. And that's a killer, mate. And then that's so true. And it all stems from shame. So there's something that we've either done and we don't want to share it because we're ashamed of it. And so I just see that through my own journey, the only way out for me was talking. Right. So by being vulnerable, talking about how we're feeling and being proactive with it, mate, not waiting for it to be near to the end and actually go, well, I'm doing all right. So if you're doing all right, how about you help with someone else as well? And go and see a psychologist when you're feeling good. Build that routine where you might see him once every couple of months just to check in, see how you're going. And then being vulnerable won't be as bad because you've done the work. Where if you introduce vulnerability later on in life, it's hard because I said earlier as well, it's all about modeling stuff as well, mate. As kids, you can tell them everything you want, but when they see something, they're going to be more likely to do it because they can see it. You trying to explain something to a 5-year-old like the way I would, they're lost after about 5 seconds. Just show me. And I'm like that sometimes. Someone will explain something and I'm like, just show me how to do it and I'll learn it and then I'll be good at it. Well, try to be. And it's the same with the kids at a young age. If they're exposed to vulnerability at a young age, then they're more likely when they get into their 20s, through their teenage years, 20s and older, that they understand it more. So they're going to be more capable of actually expressing their emotions, where when they're trying to learn that in their 30s, 40s, it's so hard. It's achievable, but it's just so much harder. So I think for us, through our lived experiences too, to be able to share our journey, but also give them the importance of vulnerability and why it's so important. And I spoke earlier as well about my journey is it's not just about us. And in my circumstance, it wasn't just about me. I had a wife and 2 kids, and that was more important that I was vulnerable to them more so than me, because it affects not just ourselves. There's so many people it affects when we limit ourselves to our own circumstances and don't speak up.
Yeah. You touched on there around modeling, and I always think back, I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and during that period of time, it was suck it up. As you said before, boys don't cry, men don't cry, don't be so soft, don't be such a pussy, all that type of stuff. And thinking back into those days, I never really saw my dad be vulnerable, but I make a conscious effort these days to show my kids my vulnerability so that they can grow up believing, and particularly my son, he can grow up believing that it's okay to show my emotions. How do you go with modeling that in your household with the 3 boys and comparing that to, I guess, your father as well growing up?
Yeah, mate, it was a struggle at first. Probably 5 years ago, I started working on it. I didn't model it before then. And at times I drop the ball now. At times my wife will remind me, or I'll realize what I'm doing or how I'm being. And I'm like, it's not fair on the kids. It's not fair. And my wife will often say, you do all this stuff with men of gold and this and that, and you talk about vulnerability, but sometimes you miss the mark here at home. And that's real too, mate. I'll be honest with you. There are times where I'm like, I'm out here trying to empower vulnerability in men, but sometimes I can't even do it. So I think it's important to share, mate, because I've always said that I'm no finished product. I go to the men's nights and I'm like, I need this just as much as you guys because it's real, mate. I'm not here to try and put on this bravado, like this brilliant person. It's literally like we're all in this together. At times we're going to have adversity and challenges, but the biggest thing for me with the boys, where I still get moody, I get miserable, I need my own time, I've got my own issues and my own mental health challenges still. It doesn't go away. I just learn how to cope with it better. And instead of taking myself away when I need a break, I'll tell the boys and I'll say, listen, boys, I'm overwhelmed at the moment. I'm struggling. Dad just needs a break. Mm-hmm. So straight away by me doing that, they're not thinking, if I stormed out of the house with me coffee and went outside or went into the garage or whatnot and didn't say anything, kids naturally think dad's pissed off with me. Dad's angry about something and it's my fault. And they mightn't have done anything, but that's naturally what they think. Dad's pissed off. But if by the simple little thing when I walk out to go, guys, I'm overwhelmed, feeling this certain way, I'm just going to go have 10, 15 minutes and have a coffee, that it puts their mind at ease to go, one, I'm being vulnerable, I'm sharing how I'm feeling. But two, it takes away that feeling or the uncertainty that they're thinking in their head if I don't say anything. And so that way, it's just like there's times the kids get angry or upset or disappointed. We share that it's actually okay that you do all that. We want you to do that. We don't want you to just say you're okay and just deal with it. We want you to express yourself. And so it's important for me just to, when I am feeling that way, just to drop it in every now and then. And as the boys get older, having those conversations, I'm really open now I haven't shared my deep and dark secrets with the boys as yet. I'm just waiting for that time. But there's times where I can get vulnerable at a real intimate level, one-on-one with the boys and actually share a bit, especially my 13-year-old. He had a bit of a meltdown on his birthday and stuff. And there's a lot of stuff that he holds on to from trauma as a young kid going through our divorce and stuff that he still to this day, mate, if I'm being real, was like, oh, I wish you and mum were still together. And when he broke down, we cried and we talked it out, but it's such a big step forward for him to be able to express himself, because for so long, you ask him, is he okay? And he'd do what I did. And I'd say, yeah, I'm all good. But eventually, like, we bottle it, and eventually it's going to burst. And for that moment with my eldest, it was great, mate. It was emotional, but there's been such a growth period from that moment to now, and he feels that he can share with me. I can be more open with him. And even as a parent, mate, like with my wife and I, we drop the ball and we might argue in front of the kids sometimes. We understand, and we'll go and apologize to the kids and say, sorry, we shouldn't have done that in front of you guys, and we'll explain why. So I think the communication's a big part of that vulnerability as well, because just saying sorry for doing something and not actually sharing with the kids why that's happening, they can start to process it and go, oh, that's why, I get it. It doesn't make it right, but at least they understand it. I had never had any of that. Our family was pretty well known. Mum and dad worked hard, and everyone's a nice big home, and we're like the prim and proper family. And it's like everyone thought we were so good, but behind closed doors, it was a different story. And so it's important. Well, the only way we're ever going to change that circle, mate, of the be tough and get on with it is through our own kids, because we're all trying to change it because we never got it modeled. So if we can model it, hopefully in the next 30, 40 years, it's a lot greater than what it is now.
Yeah, absolutely. And you touched on the humanity side of it, or the human side of it, in terms of you're big on the mental health advocacy now with Men of Gold. But sometimes when you come home, you still don't get it quite right. And that just shows that you're human and that you're working for it. Even as a therapist myself, I know all the tools and tricks to help people through their mental health stories, but I still come home and I drop the ball as well. And I mean, I've got my own lived experience of 30 plus years living with mental illness. So I've been dropping the ball for a very long time. But I think it's the conscious awareness now, particularly in 2023, where we can go, okay, yep, I've dropped the ball. It's time to pick it up and apologize, or to provide context and to actually openly talk about it with our kids, with our partners, with our mates, with our work colleagues, whoever it is, to normalize these things, as we keep saying. So let's talk about Men of Gold. Where did Men of Gold come about? What is it, and how can guys get involved?
Yeah, it's something I want to do for a while. When I was at Melbourne, Peter Robinson, the wellbeing guy there, he's a part of the men's circle, which is a little bit different to what we do. But I went a few times with him just because I was interested in it, and I could see the power of men just opening up and sharing what's going on in their lives. And again, there's a lot of reasons the men actually had to be there, because a lot of criminals or ex-crims or through courts, they had to be there. So it was a different kind of setup. But at the same time, we still had a circle of men trying to share what's going on and trying to be better. And I've always connected well with Robbo, and I speak to him weekly. And it was something that I shared with him a lot. And I think it was September last year, I was shaving my head, mate, of all places. And I just had this like feeling and sense, because I always put things off, or I want things to be perfect. I'm a bit of a perfectionist. And I just sensed in that moment, like it was almost like God was prompting me to, and in that moment, I was like, let's do it. And so I didn't know what it was going to look, how it was going to be. And initially, mate, I just wanted to provide a men's group. So for that exact same thing, is men to come who are struggling, or they're doing okay, but they just want to come and help. They can come and be themselves and start sharing how they're feeling, because we don't see it, mate. There might be certain little men's things here and there, or they might be a thing on a weekend or a barbecue or whatnot. But I just wanted to create that atmosphere and that culture where men feel safe. They feel like they can be themselves. And so when I met with Locke at our church, because I needed a space to run it, and I was very mindful that I didn't want people to think that this is a Christian-based group, which it's not. And I try to articulate it as best as I can. We're just grateful that the community and the church have provided the space for nothing. And they've got a beautiful cafe that we run it out of. And so I had to get a team. I try to do everything on my own. I don't like relying on people, but mate, you need to get a team because you need support and you can't just do this on your own. So it was probably the best advice I got, mate, at the start, because I'm finding out now if I didn't have a team, there'd be certain things that I couldn't do by myself. So I asked about probably 10 or 15 people my idea, what I wanted to do. A lot of them said no, which I respected. And because I said, if you're in, you're all in. I don't want you just to do it for a couple of weeks and think you're doing me a favor. I'd rather you just say you can't do it. And so I've got another 3 guys that had a heart for this, and just started kind of doing a bit of work in the background, started promoting it, and held our first night. We had an intro night where we got about 73 men come.
Oh, wow.
And and that was pretty cool, mate. And obviously there was a lot that just wanted to know what we're doing. There's a lot of, I suppose, Christians as well that were wondering if this is like a men's like Christian thing, or there was so, because we don't have a website, there's not a lot of knowledge about it out there. People just like, oh, I'll come along and see what it's about. And it was really encouraging, mate, to see. And from that night, we literally were meeting every Monday. Because me trying to be a perfectionist, I was like, it's September. Do we start now or do we wait till next year? By starting kind of straight away, it gave us about, a bit over 2 months of time to almost see what it was like, make some changes, get some feedback from the group and the regulars that were coming, and see how we could do things better. And I'm glad we started when we did. And then this year, same, we've kicked off. We got a lot of feedback from the guys that they'd love more events, which we've thrown some barbecues in. We've got the axe throwing day next week, and that's really important. And we just feel that that's going to grow the community, because without community, mate, this doesn't work, because I'm reliant on sponsors. I'm reliant on, people to be generous to see what we're trying to do. And a lot of it, when I say generous, it's not about money. The church give up their space. I've got a mate who is looking to help us out in a different part of the Gold Coast, and looking to potentially have another one. And these things don't work if we don't have a financial income from sponsors or people that donate stuff like the spaces. And so, mate, now we do fortnightly. We started 73 is the most we've had. The lowest numbers is 4. And then anything in between that. There for a while, it's consistently had about around 20 each Monday, and we had a few regulars. A few would come, they'd see what it's like. They would be gone for a few weeks, they'd come back. And I've always said, mate, it's not a cult. If you come 1 week and then I don't see you in 3 weeks, don't feel, oh, Dayne's going to be so off me that I'm not coming. It's up to you. We're just providing the space. You come whenever you want to come. And I think there was this early on, I reckon a lot of people, I think there's a lot of limitations around the church. I've been open about that. I think a lot of men see where it's at and have a bit of pushback with it, because they're like, oh, I can see what these blokes are up to, which is so far from the truth. And I can only keep saying that, mate, because I just don't want men to go, I want to go, but I'm not going because it's at a church, because it's in a cafe. It's not even in a cathedral or anything. But I can understand there's probably a lot of men out there that have been hurt by churches or experiences. So I've got to take that all into consideration. But mate, we're now meeting on a Monday night, and mate, it's been so good. I had me the other day, and a couple of months ago now, and just said, mate, I'm coming tonight. And I knew him, and I hadn't seen him in a long time, and I thought he was supporting me. I thought, oh, that's good. Just got a mate come along, and he sat down, and we have highs and lows. So that's our icebreaker at the start of the night. And the first time we did highs and lows, we thought of it as an icebreaker, but it went for an hour and a half. Man, it was just so easy. Men would just mention a high or a low, and then so this one night he started the highs and low, and bang, just opened up. He's like, mate, I've been 6 months, I've been watching your journey of what you guys have been doing at Men of Gold, and I've been wanting to come, and it's taken me this long. And it really put things in perspective for me, mate, because I've at times I have to check myself where I'm like, why aren't these people coming through? Like, I know so many blokes that need to be here, and I don't push them, but I'm like, there's still this stigma around it. They don't feel like they can come, or they don't want to, or that shame's so strong. And I get people are busy, mate, and for some it's just not their thing. But I'm in this for the long haul. It's not a popularity contest, and I always say that if one person comes, we're on, because that one person needs support and needs to be heard. I think that's important to understand. This isn't about us educating men. It's sometimes just being an ear for others. And so, mate, yeah, and I'm looking to do a podcast soon. That's something that I'm excited about and nervous as well at the same time, something new. But being on a few, I kind of see the power we could have in potentially sharing stories, lived experiences. So if men can't make our nights, your podcast will be the same, mate. Men can have an opportunity to put a podcast on in the car, no one around, no pressure, nothing, and they can still have that story, because something might resonate with someone, and usually most things do with men in general. So I just think through that, it will just help broaden our audience and hopefully normalize men of gold throughout the community. And into the future, mate, I want to see men of gold be something where when we talk about it, people understand what it is, and we see multiple locations.
Yeah, it sounds really cool. And if I lived on the Gold Coast, I'd be there for sure. I'm up on the sunny coast, so it's a bit of a drive to get to the men's nights. But you mentioned some guys, yeah, they might have been sitting there for 6 months watching and just waiting for the moment when they feel like they've got that courage to go. And for me, it took me 20. It's great that you're just providing a space for guys to come along and share whatever their vulnerabilities are at the time. And even them not sharing, just to sit in a chair and just be with other guys is an empowering thing in itself. So thanks so much for creating this vehicle for guys. Now, you mentioned you didn't have a website. So if guys are listening and they want to touch base and they want to come to the Men of Gold night, how do they find you? How do they get in touch?
Instagram's their only access at the moment, mate. Just Men of Gold AU on Instagram. And even if you don't have Instagram and you search Men of Gold on your web browser, it'll still come up. And we have when our next men's group is on the top. So whether you've got Instagram or not, you can still search that and it'll come up. We always have my contact email on there. So if anyone wanted to reach out and contact me personally, my email's on there as well. And I'm sure you'll throw it in the notes. So if anyone does want to get in contact with me, they can do that. Ideally, mate, with funding and stuff moving forward, I'd love a website for men to be able to reach out with resources and different stuff. But for now, mate, it is what it is. Word of mouth will be our best provider for men to come. And I think the more men experience it and share with someone else, it's going to encourage them to maybe go, oh, maybe I'll try that. So I'm trying to cater for everyone. I'm trying to almost provide moving locations. I'm in Tweed, but I'm looking to potentially do one in Burleigh. I know it's only 15, 20 minutes down the road, but on the Gold Coast, man, it can become quite stuck in their own areas. Yeah. But I get it, mate. And it might just open up another door for some men. And if that works, then we're doing our job. And we'll just keep being agile and moving where we need to continually create this space for men and ultimately encourage men to be better and get out of this rut or this mental prison that we continually put ourselves in.
Yeah, Dayne, I've really enjoyed this conversation. One more question and then I'll let you go. And I will put the links in the show notes so people can access them really easily. But I always like to finish each episode on my guest plugging something that makes them feel good. And it's a pay it forward thing. So it doesn't have to be anything to do with mental health or vulnerability or anything that we've talked about. It's just something that you're listening to, watching, reading, doing as a self-care activity that you can pay it forward and our listeners can maybe try it out for themselves.
You just put me on the spot here, mate. I'll be quite honest with you, mate. I enjoy coffee more than probably anyone, and I drink way too much of it. But what I do to kind of clock off, and mate, I listen to Joel and Fletch. They're down in Sydney. Obviously, I listen to their podcast, and usually they're on in an afternoon. So I listen to the podcast the next morning when I'm on my way to work. They've just got great banner. They're great guys. And for me, it's important that I do clock off, because I think a lot of the time when I'm dealing with my own battles with mental health and whatnot, I think a lot of the time you can get stuck trying to fix yourself all the time. And I think at times just absolutely having no thoughts of anything and just focusing on something you enjoy. And for me, it's having a laugh and listening to that. And so, mate, very simple, but Shout out to Joel and Fletch.
No, simple's good. Then that's what I'm after. And coffee as well. Like I love sitting down with a cuppa and sitting out the back and watching the kids play or just having some quiet time when they're at school. So it's a really nice thing to do. So, but Dayne, thanks so much for your time this morning. Really have loved our chat around men's mental health, vulnerability, around the footy as well. I love talking about footy. Thanks so much again and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Simon.
Well, that's a wrap for today's episode, and I hope you got some value from it. If anything triggered your mental health today, please reach out to your support networks. Also, if you loved what you heard, be sure to subscribe to the show and share it with your mates. For more from Mindful Men, you can check us out on Instagram and YouTube, and I'll throw the links to these pages in the show notes below. But until next time, stay mindful.